She was my teacher, and the one I shouldn't want. Every glance, every touch was forbidden, but I couldn't stop myself. Would desire finally cross the line into love? I never thought a classroom could feel like the edge of something dangerous, something I wanted to fall into. Yet, there she was leaning against the whiteboard, arms crossed, eyes that somehow knew more about me than I knew about myself. Ms. Callahan, 46, maybe 47, the kind of woman who carried herself like the world had handed her every secret and she decided which ones to share. And somehow, when she looked at me, I felt like I was the only secret she hadn't figured out yet. It was quiet that morning, too quiet. The hum of fluorescent lights, the faint smell of coffee clinging to the air. I sat near the back, pretending to check my notebook, but really watching how her lips twitched when she smiled at something only she seemed to notice. My fingers tapped nervously against the desk. She turned, as if she knew I was staring, and for half a second, her gaze caught mine. I looked away, too fast, heart hammering. She wore a green cardigan that softened her sharp angles and a silver necklace that caught the light when she moved. Every time she adjusted her hair or tucked a loose strand behind her ear, I felt something strange, an electric tug in my chest I couldn't name. I met older women before, teachers even, but none had made me feel both small and seen at the same time. I could sense her noticing me too, though she'd never say it out loud. There was that moment yesterday when I lingered after class to ask a question about an assignment. She leaned forward slightly, closer than professional distance should allow, and I could feel the faintest warmth in her gaze. I laughed nervously at something stupid I said, and she didn't correct me, just let me unravel. I hated that it thrilled me. I hated that I wanted to see her again the next day. I hated that I wanted to know what her Saturday mornings were like, if she smiled the same when no one was watching, if she ever wondered about me, like I couldn't stop wondering about her. But today felt different. There was a tension in the air, unspoken but heavy. Maybe it was the way she lingered at her desk, pretending to grade papers but stealing glances at me. Maybe it was the way I found myself adjusting my sleeves, trying to seem calm while my stomach twisted into knots I hadn't felt in years. When she finally spoke, her voice cut through the quiet like sunlight breaking glass. You've always been too eager to rush, James. Sometimes you need to stop and just learn. Her words weren't just about the assignment. I could feel it. My chest tightened. I wanted to argue, wanted to tell her I already had learned so much from her. Instead, I swallowed, nodded, and felt the heat rise in my ears. I wanted to reach out, to touch her hand accidentally on the desk, to bridge the impossible space between teacher and student, between adult and boy, but I didn't. And then the moment shattered in the quietest, sharpest way. A chime from her phone on the desk, small but unmistakable. She glanced down, a flicker of surprise, or was it fear, crossing her face? I couldn't hear the message. I couldn't see the screen, but the way her eyes widened and how her hand hovered over the phone as if it carried a secret too heavy to ignore, made my pulse spike. And in that silence, that small, electric, impossible silence, I realized I wasn't just curious about her anymore. I was hooked. The doorbell rang downstairs, sudden, loud, wrong in a way that made my stomach drop. And I knew, without understanding how, that something was about to change. Something about her, about us. And I wanted it to. I couldn't stop thinking about the chime on her phone. Even hours later, back in my tiny apartment with the streetlights flickering outside, I kept picturing her expression, the way her brows had drawn together, the quick inhale before her fingers hovered over the screen. I remembered then why this was dangerous. Ms. Callahan wasn't just older. She had a history I could only guess at. Widowed young, a small daughter now grown, someone who had loved and lost, and probably built walls I could never hope to scale. And me? I was 22, fumbling through the edges of my own life. Freshly out of college, moving between part-time jobs, not really knowing who I wanted to be, yet feeling something in her that demanded honesty before I even understood it. The risk of us, was dizzying. She was a teacher, a mentor, someone I should respect from a careful distance. And yet there was that pull, that small magnetic tug that made my chest tighten when I thought about leaning too close, about the brush of her hand, about the sound of her laughter echoing in empty hallways after everyone else had gone. I tried to push it down, tried to tell myself it was a phase, a harmless fascination. But I remember a moment last week when I'd arrived early and found her in the staff lounge, sipping coffee with a worn notebook in front of her. She looked up, smiled softly, and I caught the faintest tremor in her fingers as she closed the book. Vulnerability hidden beneath that composed exterior. I wanted to reach out and steady her, wanted to tell her I could be a safe place, but I hadn't. I just lingered in the doorway until she noticed me and waved me off. She had her own battles, I could see it. A flicker of sadness in her eyes that didn't belong to me. A quiet loneliness she wore like a shawl. And maybe that's why the quiet moments between us were so loaded. Why a single glance could feel like a confession. Today, in class, the tension was palpable. I noticed how she shifted her weight when I raised my hand, how she lingered over my work a fraction too long, commenting on details that no one else would notice. My heart thudded like a drum I couldn't silence. I wanted to tell her everything I felt, but my words would only make it awkward, ruin what little control we both maintained. Later, as we packed up, she reached for a stack of papers, and our hands brushed, just for a second, electric and fleeting, but enough to make me inhale sharply. I looked at her, and she looked at me, and we both held the gaze longer than necessary. A silence stretched between us, soft and dangerous, like a secret waiting to be named. "Did you ever?" she began, then stopped, shaking her head with a faint smile. "Never mind." I want to press her, to coax the words out, but instead I just nodded. Whatever she had been going to say, it didn't matter. That hesitation, that almost admission, made me feel closer to her than I had in weeks. And in that small, imperfect moment, I realized something terrifying and beautiful at once. I wasn't just drawn to her. I was tethered to her in a way I couldn't explain, in a way I wasn't sure I wanted to untangle. The air between us held something unspoken, electric yet fragile, a shared tension that neither of us dared name. And as I walked home, my mind replayed that brush of hands, that halted confession over and over. Something had shifted, and I knew, without a doubt, it wasn't going back. I should have stayed home that night. I knew it the second my phone buzzed. But when Ms. Callahan had texted, asking if I could drop by her place for something urgent, something in me couldn't say no. My heart pounded in a way that made my fingers tremble as I gripped the steering wheel. When I arrived, the hallway smelled faintly of vanilla and old books. The apartment was quiet, too quiet. She greeted me with that same careful composure, but there was a flicker in her eyes I hadn't seen before. A flash of something raw, maybe guilt, maybe longing. I just needed to ask you something about the project," she started, voice slightly unsteady. But the way she lingered near the doorway, shifting weight from one foot to the other, made my chest tighten. It wasn't the project. It was never the project. I stepped closer, and for a heartbeat, our hands brushed again. The contact lingered, electric and impossible. My throat went dry, and I felt that familiar pull, the one that made me want to cross every line I knew I shouldn't. Then came a knock. Startled, we both froze. I hadn't even realized anyone could be there. She paled just slightly. "Who?" she whispered, a tremor in her voice. I'll get it," I said, but she placed a hand on my arm. Not to stop me, exactly. More like warning, caution, desire. It was her neighbor, checking in about a package. A simple interruption, but it broke the tension like a wave slamming into a fragile cliff. We laughed nervously, too aware of the closeness we'd allowed. But when the door clicked shut, the room seemed smaller, the air thicker. We didn't speak at first. I wanted to tell her how long I'd imagined this moment, the way I imagined pressing closer and feeling her hand in mine. But the words stuck in my throat. James, she finally said, voice low, almost lost. "We can't." I knew exactly what she meant. And yet, the distance between us felt unbearable. I took a cautious step closer, just close enough to feel her warmth. She didn't pull away. She didn't stop me. She only exhaled, shaky and almost inaudible. "I know," I said softly. "I know it's wrong, but I can't. I can't pretend I don't care." Her eyes flickered, guilt, fear, desire all at once. The weight of everything we shouldn't do pressed down on us. And somehow, that weight made the pull stronger. We lingered in that fragile, dangerous silence, each aware of the risks, each tethered by the invisible thread that had been forming between us for weeks. Then, just as I thought we might collapse into that impossible closeness, her phone buzzed again. She glanced at the screen. Her hand hovered over it, hesitation etched in the tight set of her jaw. And I realized in that split second That no matter how much we wanted each other, the outside world, rules, expectations, past mistakes, was still there. Waiting, watching. We couldn't cross that line yet. But God, how close we were. I should have known better than to show up at her office after hours. But something about the quiet hum of the empty building, the smell of old books and polish, made it impossible to stay away. She was there, alone, leaning against her desk, reviewing papers. The soft light from the desk lamp painted her face in golden hues, highlighting the subtle lines around her eyes, the curve of her lips. I wanted to tell her how much I noticed, how much I had memorized without meaning to, but words stuck in my throat. "You're late," she said, not looking up. Her voice was calm, almost neutral, but I could hear it, the slight catch in the middle that betrayed the tension simmering beneath. I couldn't stop thinking about you," I admitted, the words tumbling out before I could filter them. Her pen paused mid-sentence. She looked up slowly, eyes wide, as though I'd revealed something I wasn't supposed to see. "You shouldn't," she whispered. And I knew she meant it in every possible way, morally, professionally, emotionally. Yet the way she said it, it wasn't anger. It wasn't judgment. It was warning and longing, all wrapped in one fragile bundle. The air between us was taut. I could see her pulse in her neck, the way her fingers clenched the edge of the desk. My chest felt tight, my stomach twisting. This was the point I'd feared and craved. A breaking point, a moment when restraint teetered on the edge. "I can't help it," I said, stepping closer. "I try. God, I try. But I think about you every day. And when I see you, like this," my voice cracked, but I didn't care. I had to tell her. Had to make her see. Her lips parted slightly, as if to speak, but no words came. She looked away, quickly, shame and desire flickering across her face. Then came the sound of another door opening. Someone else in the building, most likely a janitor finishing late. I cursed under my breath, the spell broken, the tension snapping in an instant. She took a step back, distancing herself, and I felt it as sharply as a punch. "You shouldn't," she began again, her voice barely audible this time. "I know," I interrupted, desperate, reckless. "I know this is impossible. I know it's wrong. But I can't stop thinking about you." Her eyes glistened, the corners wet with something I couldn't name. I wanted to reach for her, to touch her, to erase all the rules with a single, foolish gesture. But I hesitated. The world outside, the consequences, the risks, all of it pressed down like a weight I couldn't ignore. And in that suspended moment, the air crackling around us, I realized something terrifying and exhilarating. We were standing on the edge. One step, one word, one impulsive move, and everything would change. She inhaled sharply, trembling slightly. My hand itched to reach for hers. My heart hammered, threatening to burst from my chest. Time seemed to stretch, and then the phone buzzed on her desk. She glanced down, fingers hovering over the screen. I held my breath. Whatever she was about to do, whatever we were about to do, there was no going back after this. The day started like any other, mundane, quiet, the kind of ordinary I usually hated. But nothing about today was ordinary. I was sitting in the campus cafe, pretending to scroll through my phone when I saw her across the room. Ms. Callahan, alone, sipping her coffee, scrolling through something on her laptop. I felt that familiar tug in my chest, the one that made me want to run to her and collapse into reckless honesty. And then I saw him, her assistant, someone I barely knew, someone I'd never noticed before, standing too close, leaning over the laptop with a grin that didn't belong. Their heads were close together, whispering, laughing softly. Something passed between them, something that didn't include me. My stomach lurched. I tried to tell myself I was overreacting, that maybe it was innocent. But I remembered last night, the lingering glances, the trembling fingers, the way I'd wanted to touch her, but hadn't. The jealousy hit like ice water. My chest felt tight, my hands shaking. I wanted to storm over, demand an explanation, expose every secret I'd been hiding from the world. But instead, I stayed seated, watching, my heart breaking in slow, deliberate beats. When she finally looked up, our eyes met for the briefest second. I thought I saw surprise, no, guilt, flicker across her face. And just like that, my heart twisted. I realized that our fragile tension, the one we'd been building carefully, was now under threat. And the risk wasn't just the world outside. It was something closer, something I hadn't accounted for. I left the cafe without a word, barely feeling the weight of my bag on my shoulder. Every step was heavy with doubt. How much did she care about me? How much had I misread? How fragile was everything we'd been tiptoeing around? By the time I got back to my apartment, my phone buzzed. A message from her. "We need to talk. Can you come over tonight?" I wanted to hesitate, to back out, to give myself a moment to breathe. But I didn't. I needed to know, needed to confront the truth, whatever it was. Her apartment smelled faintly of lavender when I arrived, the soft glow of lamps painting shadows across the walls. She was pacing near the window, her hands clasped tightly, her expression unreadable. I didn't mean for you to see that," she began, voice trembling slightly. "It's complicated." "Complicated?" I asked, my own voice shaking with a mix of anger and fear. "Are you with him?" Her eyes softened, flickered, and she shook her head. "No, he's just a coworker. But James, there are things I haven't told you. Things I should have." My stomach nodded. Every step we'd taken toward each other felt like it could unravel in an instant. I wanted to demand answers, to demand the honesty I'd been craving, but I also wanted to hold her, to tell her I trusted her even if the world didn't. She stepped closer, her gaze steady now, full of that fragile, impossible mix of vulnerability and courage I couldn't resist. "I'm scared too," she whispered. "Scared of what could happen, and scared of losing you before we even begin." I swallowed hard. My heart was a war between desire and reason. But for the first time, the pull between us felt stronger than the fear, stronger than the stakes. And in that moment, I realized nothing would ever be simple again. The apartment felt smaller tonight, almost suffocating in its quiet, like the walls themselves were leaning in to listen. I could hear my own heartbeat, loud and uneven, each thump a reminder of how much I was about to risk. She stood near the kitchen counter, arms crossed, eyes flicking toward me and then away. Vulnerable, afraid, honest in ways she rarely allowed anyone to see. "I don't know if this is a mistake," she said finally, voice barely above a whisper. "I've spent years building walls, James. Years convincing myself I had to be careful." I took a step closer, and now, her lips twitched, uncertain, hesitant. "Now, I don't know if I can be careful anymore." That was all I needed. Every restraint I'd held, every fear of crossing lines, every whisper of doubt, shattered. I moved closer, and she didn't step back. The space between us vanished in a heartbeat, and I felt her presence like gravity pulling me in. "I don't care about walls," I said, voice trembling. "I care about you. All of you. Every part you try to hide." Her eyes glistened. She shook her head slightly, as if she couldn't believe I could see her so clearly, accept her so completely. And in that moment, the distance, the rules, the age difference, all the reasons we'd whispered don't, disappeared. We stood there, close enough that the faint warmth of her breath brushed against my cheek. My hand hovered near hers, almost an accident, almost an admission, until finally, slowly, she let me hold it. Just for a moment. It was messy, not perfect, not cinematic. Her hand trembled, my pulse raced, and the quiet between us was heavy with everything we hadn't said. But somehow, in that imperfection, there was honesty. There was truth. "I've wanted this," I admitted, almost ashamed. "For so long. But I was scared of losing you before I even had you." Her lips parted, a half smile, a half sigh. "I was scared too," she said, her voice breaking just slightly. "Scared of letting someone in. Scared of letting you in." And then, for the first time, the air shifted. We didn't rush, didn't collapse into some rushed moment of passion. Instead, we stood, hand in hand, eyes locked, letting the reality of our choices settle. Love, yes, but also fear, risk, desire, and hesitation, all tangled together. We didn't need words anymore. The confession had been made. The barrier had been broken. Whatever came next, whatever world outside this apartment demanded of us, couldn't undo this moment. She leaned her head slightly against my shoulder. I held her. We were messy. We were human. And we were finally, impossibly, together. But even in that closeness, I felt it, the faint pulse of uncertainty, the echo of all the rules and fears waiting outside our little bubble. Could we navigate it? Would we survive the world judgment? I didn't know. And yet, for now, it didn't matter. We'd chosen each other. And for the first time in years, I felt alive. The sun was just beginning to rise when I walked her to the door. Morning light spilled across the hardwood floor, soft and forgiving, as if it wanted to bless this fragile, impossible happiness we'd carved out. She looked up at me, hair slightly messy from sleep, eyes warm but heavy with all the emotions of the past weeks: desire, fear, guilt, and finally, relief. I couldn't stop staring. Every line on her face told a story I had memorized without meaning to. Every curve, every gesture was a map I wanted to trace forever. "James," she said softly, voice catching. "Are you sure about this?" I took her hand, squeezing it gently. "I've never been more sure about anything in my life," I said. "You, us, whatever comes next, I don't care. I just want this with you." She smiled, and it was small but radiant, like the first sunrise after a long, stormy night. The hesitation lingered for a moment, the weight of the world pressing against us, but then she leaned in, just slightly, enough for our foreheads to touch. A small, intimate gesture that said everything we couldn't put into words. We laughed quietly, awkwardly, as though releasing months of tension in a single breath. There was still uncertainty, life outside the apartment, judgment, whispers, but in that room, in that quiet bubble of early morning, none of it mattered. We had each other, and that was enough for now. As we stepped outside, the air crisp and filled with possibility, I realized how far we'd come. From stolen glances in a classroom to whispered confessions in the dark, every step had been messy, risky, and human. And yet here we were, together. She glanced at me, biting her lip in that subtle, familiar way I loved. "Do you think we'll figure it out?" she asked, half teasing, half uncertain. "I know we will," I said, though my voice carried the truth of our fragility. "Not because it'll be easy, but because we finally want the same thing. And that counts for more than anything else." She nodded, leaning into my shoulder as we walked down the quiet street. The city was waking up, life continuing around us, but we were in our own orbit, two flawed, complicated humans who had found something real in the chaos. I let the silence stretch, not needing to fill it with words. Her hand in mine was enough. Her presence beside me was enough. And for the first time, I felt a calm I hadn't known I was capable of feeling, an acknowledgement that love didn't have to be perfect to be worth it. As we reached the corner where we'd part ways for the morning, she turned to me, eyes glimmering with that impossible mix of hope and hesitation. "See you later?" "Always," I replied. And as I walked away, I felt it, the quiet certainty that we'd crossed the line from fantasy into reality, and that nothing could take that away. Sparkles, thank you for reading. She was my teacher. You've learned more than lessons. You've learned me. Did you enjoy the story? What kind of romantic, slow-burn stories would you like to hear next? Sparkling Heart, subscribe to our channel for more heartfelt, human stories every week. Don't miss the next one.